Hello and welcome to a very Monday day specific version of the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. And I'm your co-host Steve Wirt, and I'm joined by.
I'm Tim Hannon, and we are releasing this on a Monday morning, though, Steve, not a Monday night.
Well, I have a very specific question for you, Tim, and this a lot rides on this whether we'll finish the rest of the podcast because we stop right now or we can keep going. Tim, the question is: Are you ready? Are you ready for some football?
Give me a few minutes to think about that one.
It's a Monday night party. Al and Dan and I can't. That's why do I remember the Al
Uh,
Michaels Dan Dierdorf booth out of everybody. I guess that's because that's when I was watching it
it was in
mainly.
the song. It was in the lyrics of the
Yeah,
song.
yeah. Well, did he say like way back in the '70s? Like no, they had a different song back in
Yeah,
the
they didn't
'70s.
have that
Yeah,
song back then.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you haven't figured out what our topic is yet, we're going to talk about the Steelers on Monday Night Football. They had a very long streak. We're not. This is not a comprehensive list. I'm not going to cover every little game like from the '70s to whatever, but we will cover some of the more memorable ones. And there's actually one game on here that's not on Monday night, but it kind of involves Monday Night Football. So it's an interesting conversation. So during the '80s and '90s, and even into 2000, America was asking the question I just asked him: Are we ready for some football? And apparently, according to the ratings, the answer was yes, yes, very much so. And for that was like normally the top rated program of the week, when it aired most times, especially if like there are certain teams that did well on there, like Dallas, Washington, the Steelers do well. I'm sure Green Bay does okay too, but they don't have as large a fan base as Dallas or Green Bay or Dallas or Pittsburgh or probably one of the New York teams too. So on this episode, we're going to look at this streak. We're going to look how it started, like maybe just before it started, and how it technically ended. Although I don't know, Tim. I'm sure they're going to like when they say things next year if they play a Monday night game, which they probably will because they made the playoffs. That I'm sure they'll like word it a certain way because if you word it a certain way, technically the Steelers Monday night streak isn't over. Technically, but it's odd.
Well, technically, NFL records are for regular season, right? So if you say
If you
that,
say they have not lost a home Monday night football game in the regular season, you would be technically correct.
right, right, but
Right.
it's the same with any other NFL record, right?
Yeah.
If Patrick Mahomes throws 50 touchdown passes,
That's a
and then
regular season.
right,
Yeah.
but if he throws five in the playoffs, they don't say, well, he threw 55 touchdown passes. His record is 50.
It's just like how Franco has like I think he's still like isn't Franco still like have the most touchdowns in the postseason or pretty close to it?
Probably, but
Yeah.
it's a different category
Right. He
than
doesn't have the
yeah,
most touchdowns of all time.
right, right, yeah. So yeah, you're right. It ended on a technicality.
But anyway, do you want to learn about the history of Monday Night Football, Tim? Of course you do.
I'd
Who
love to.
doesn't?
Yes.
Yes. So, so after poor Burt Bell had his heart attack and died, a gentleman named Pete Rozelle took over, and when he wasn't getting sued by Al Davis, he was coming up with great ideas and great ways to run the NFL. He really is the father of the modern NFL, quite honestly. I would say Burt Bell got them through. He's kind of like a chief kind of character, like him and the chief, and who was the George Hallis
George
kind of
Ellis.
the
Yeah.
the early days, Paul Brown, like those guys kind of got us to the '60s, and then Pete Rozelle gets us from the '60s into the when did Pete Rozelle stop being commissioner? '90s, '80s,
Late
'90s,
80s.
yeah. So that we're kind of in that period, and I don't know if that's the peak period of football's popularity or if it's going to start to wane or what, but you never know. So he had this idea. He wanted to get the NFL to a national audience because it was still a very regional game. Like you got to understand, like back in 1970, maybe I'm sure most of our viewers, but maybe there's some younger guys that younger folks. I don't want to be gender specific. There could be some younger girls too that didn't remember. That didn't remember that football was a like twice a twice a day kind of thing. Like you saw it, maybe you saw a college game on Saturday, maybe a NFL game on Sunday. And normally during the 70s, 80s, that was the CBS game, and they always broadcast what team was broadcast, always CBS on Sundays when CBS had the NFC. You remember, Tim? That would
In
be
Dallas.
America's team. Yeah,
Yeah.
the America's team. So that's always been part of the reason why Dallas is so popular, is because they were always the national team. So, with that in mind, Pete Rozelle decided to put a game on Monday night, and ABC was lacking in the ratings, so they were kind of like, because back then you only had what, three networks, right?
Mm-hmm.
CBS, NBC, ABC, and actually there there was some experimenting with games during the week on something called the Dumont Network. And the only thing I never know that aired on the Dumont Network was the Ernie Kovacs show. And I don't know why I know that. And if you don't know who Ernie Kovacs is, he was a very avant garde comedian from the 1950s. So, wow, there's a reference for you that nobody will get except for me. The most popular pairing, of course. So now there were three national games in a week. So you basically had whatever the CBS afternoon game was, and maybe NBC, and then you had a Sunday night game eventually, and then the Monday night game. But it really was it really wasn't the Sunday night game. Really wasn't popular until later, much later in the 90s. So it really was Sunday afternoon and Monday night, and it ended up being really great. And the most popular, they had three announcer booths. What they started with, they started with oh, who's the guy who used to call USC games? Whoa,
Keith
Nelly,
Jackson.
yeah,
Yeah.
Keith
Yep.
Jackson. I can't remember his name. Early onset Alzheimer's, Tim. It's time for me to go now. But yeah, Keith Jackson. They did until they wanted Frank Gifford, and Frank Gifford was in another contract, and he becomes available. So they had Frank Gifford, Howard Cosell, and Dandy Don Meredith, the former quarterback for the Cowboys at that point, and it kind of stayed like that for a very long time to the 80s, and then finally in the 2000s with Al Michaels and John Madden, and that was kind of the second most popular. But that was at the end of the broadcast TV run, and we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. How what happened to Monday Night Football. So we're gonna go over memorable Steelers game. Here you want to listen to an opening before one of the Steelers. Here's Hank Williams Jr., who's a Steeler fan.
Are you ready to rock? Are you ready to roll? Are you ready for the Giants and the Steelers in a primetime smash mouth show? We're gonna make you smile and get rid of your blues. Monday Night Football boogie for you. Are you ready for the football?
Wow, what a intro by Hank Williams there. He's keeping it country. So before the streak started, and I only bring this up because I know Tim was at this game along with Barry Bonds. Did you realize that you and Barry Bonds attended this football game on Monday night?
I didn't until I saw you unearthed that picture of him hanging out with the pit band.
Yeah, he looks very. I don't know. It just looks kind of shocked in this picture.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like that's the most random sports picture ever. It's Steve found a picture from this Monday Night Football game of Barry Bonds when he played for the Pirates, sitting with the pit band at a Steeler game.
Yeah, this is Monday, October 14th, 1991. This is the Giants at the Steelers, and the Giants win 23-20 on a Matt Barr field goal. Yes, that Matt Barr, Tim. The Steelers were down 20-3. I remember that. I remember hearing about that because I didn't watch this game live, but I remember news reports. And the Steelers kind of came back in the fourth quarter, but it was one of those games where the Giants kind of gave up a lead and the Steelers tie it. And then Jeff Hostetler, who was the quarterback for the Giants, drives them down the field. And Matt Barr kicks a field goal to end it with 4 seconds. And that would be the last home loss during the regular season for the Steelers. So,
yeah, I was I was at that game, like Steve mentioned, and that was Chuck Noll's last year. And it was very similar to the end of the Tomlin era where people were just kind of had run out of patience with. It was kind of the same thing every year, kind of story. And earlier that day, the Pirates, you mentioned Barry Bonds.
Yeah, they were in the NLCS.
Yeah, they were in the NLCS against the Braves, and they had beaten the Braves to take a 3-2 lead in that series. So they were literally one game away from the World Series. So everybody was really excited about that. And then you come to the Steeler Monday night game, everybody's on a high. And then the first half, it's just like Giants take this huge lead. Bubby Brister's throwing interceptions whenever they're not just going 3 and out. And what I'll always remember from that game, Steve, and I spent way too much time trying to actually find the audio of this because I wanted to see if you know how sometimes your memory, you know,
You talk the Mandela effect.
yeah. Well, your memory is one thing, and then you'd like to back it up with like actual proof. But what I remember from that game is that everybody started after one of the 3 and outs or turnovers. Everybody sarcastically started chanting "Let's go Bucks."
Nice.
And which is, you'd never in a million years see that again.
You never know, Tim. Maybe let's go Pens. Maybe
maybe let's go Pens. But like literally, and maybe it wasn't everybody. Maybe it was my section of the stadium, or maybe it was during a commercial break. And in 1991 low def TV, it's kind of hard to make out audio in the background anyway. But I did. I really tried. I watched through the whole first half of that game trying to find the spot where the crowd turned. There was a lot of booing, that's for sure. I found a lot of people booing. That was easy to spot, but I could not.
Was this the Joe Walton offense?
Yeah, this was the Joe Walton. No, this was Joe Walton. This was the end of the Chuck Noll regime. And again, everybody was just kind of fed up and. Hey, why can't you be more like the Pirates? They're winning. They're trying. That's a good team.
Well, the best part is they benched, like you said, they benched Bobby Brister for Neil O'Donnell, and O'Donnell had a good game. And after the game, Chuck Noll, in all his wisdom, says he should have started O'Donnell over Brister due to Brister having a sore knee, thus creating a quarterback controversy. On a team that did they even make the playoffs? I don't think they made the playoffs in '91. I think they were like 7-9, or
they were 7-9. You're correct.
Yeah. So the Pirates, hey, they're doing well. It is kind of weird that was such a juxtaposition to where we are now, where like you said, the Steelers are really good, and you would probably more chance of hearing a "Let's Go Steelers" chant at a Pirates game,
right? Well, maybe Steve. Maybe now that the streak has ended, things will flip back the other way. Maybe that's
never know.
The streak started with that, so maybe now that it's over.
So the next season, the Steelers are on Monday night, and it's October 19th, 1992, and the Steelers score 20 points and hold the Bengals to a big fat 0. The first game of the streak, they beat them Bengals. Who gonna beat them Bengals? The Steelers shuts down Boomer Esiason and Carl Pickens. They also run the ball with Barry Foster. That was kind of that whole season. They ran the ball really well. He had 108 yards rushing. Neil O'Donnell played well, just kind of completing passes when he needs to, not throwing interceptions. Dwight Stone drops a bunch of passes. I forgot Dwight Stone was still in the mix at this point, but he does catch 2 touchdowns. Here's an interview about Boomer Esiason telling us how he and the Bengals suck.
I said that I didn't ever think that I'd be the quarterback of a team that got 125 yards in a game. And we're all taking turns and making mistakes, and it is very, very frustrating.
He's not happy.
Yeah, way to tell. That guy might have a career in broadcasting.
Yeah, you mentioned Dwight Stone. There's ball, it's literally 3 times in, I want to say the first quarter, or the first quarter and change, he has a ball go right through his hands. And one's on the 3-yard line where he's trying to turn into the end zone before he gets the ball, and that costs him a touchdown. but like you said, he kind of comes back later and makes up for it. So that was a nice little in-game redemption story for old Dwight Hands of Stone.
Here's a question, Tim, and I get the feel I was just started following the Steelers in '92. Why did now? Normally, like he seems to me like he's Ike Taylor. Like, why did they not make him a corner? They needed a corner back then badly. Like, why not make him a corner? Like,
But
that was
good
never a
question.
thought. Like, he doesn't have to catch the ball. He can run really fast. He was a good special teams player too. He could tackle. Like, I don't understand why they just didn't put him on offense or defense. I mean, as a defensive back. That's what I would have done with him after the first season of seeing him drop passes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that ever entered anybody's mind. I mean, he did have a pretty long career in the NFL. I think he played until like 2002 or something.
He was a special teams kind of
Yeah.
ace kind of guy.
He they also used him on like reverses, stuff like that. He was kind of like that kind of a player.
Yeah, I think it's like a shame. You feel like it's a guy who never really reached his potential because maybe he's kind of like a guy they never could find a position for.
He was immensely talented too. I mean, you can
It
find
kind of reminds
highlights.
me like Tim Tebow. Like they never really,
Yeah,
he wasn't good enough.
yeah.
He really wasn't a quarterback, but they tried him so late in his career at tight end. He stunk at it. Like they just could never find a good spot. And there's guys all over the NFL history like that, where it's just like you feel like maybe they should have. Cordell Stewart is almost like another one. People said he maybe should have been a wide receiver. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that. I feel like there's a little bit more of that um, uh, openness to flexibility today. You look at like that guy for the Saints, Taysom Hill, who was a
Yeah,
quarterback, and they use him at tight end, and they just he's not a star. He's not going to be a quarterback. He's not going to be a star tight end. But they know he's so athletic that they want to find ways to just use him in the offense. And I think Dwight Stone could have been one of those guys that had they found whatever the right spot for him was. But he still made some plays. Like you can go dig up some Dwight Stone highlights where he's
that
outrunning
game he had
people.
two touchdowns.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
was super fast. He was
yeah.
really fast.
Very, very, very talented football player. Just sometimes, well, a lot of times had trouble
But that's
hanging
why a
on to the
defensive back, you
football.
don't got to catch the ball. Just don't Dwayne Washington to
Yeah,
other people.
yeah. Maybe he would have been a good defensive back. Who knows? Good question.
Anyway, moving on. These games are kind of in no specific order. We're just kind of all over the place. So we're gonna go to a game that we've talked about many times before. Monday, November 13th, 1995, a dark day in Pittsburgh sports history and Cleveland sports history. Is this the day that the Browns rivalry died, or was it later in the season when they played the last game in Memorial Stadium, I guess?
Yeah, Municipal Stadium.
Municipal.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it never
It's either
really.
this or that one. Yeah, it's never really
Yeah,
come back after this. What a sad day.
it's
Yeah.
had like little flare ups. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's like if you have like a condition and it's healed, but there's like little flare ups. So there was the playoff game in 2002. There was the playoff game in 2020. There was a couple other things over the years, but you're right.
The
It's
Miles
mostly
Garrett incident.
yeah, yeah, right, exactly. But it's mostly dead.
Well, the Steelers win this one 20-3. Um, Cordell throws his first touchdown pass as a pro.
Speaking of finding ways to use a guy, that was
Yeah.
exactly what that game did for Cordell because he had never really even sniffed the field at that point. And you said that was November of that season.
Yeah.
And then he became this, that again, like that Taysom Hill kind of player really for the rest of that season.
Yeah. And you wore your black armband, right, Tim? The
Orange.
orange. Oh, it was orange. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, because Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That was a weird game because all the Pittsburgh fans, wanted to support the Browns and everybody hated the Browns, but nobody wanted to see them leave. It's like, well, we want to beat them. We don't want their team to be taken away. So it was a weird time. It was a weird game. But that's Art Modell. And like we talked about that in the other episode. It was a shame that it happened. But you don't totally blame Art Modell for it either.
Well, I'm sure people in Cleveland still do, but
Sure,
that's
sure, and I get it. I would too.
they're allowed to be bitter, I guess.
Absolutely.
Anyway, moving on to 1993. Well, moving backwards, we're going back in time. November 15th, Monday, November 15th, 1993. It's the Buffalo Bills are in town. And can you imagine a time when the Steelers could not beat the Buffalo Bills? It's not that hard to manage. We're kind of there right now. It's kind of funny when the Bills have a really good quarterback. We really can't beat them. The Bills had a really good quarterback. Actually had a pretty decent backup too, Frank Reich.
Mm-hmm.
So they have Jim Kelly. And the Bills, who had beaten the Steelers 5 straight times, and they appeared to be streaming to their 4th AFC title, which I think they did. They did get it
Yes.
this year. This always seemed like a turning point in the Bills Steelers season, right? Eric Green catches a touchdown. The Steelers dominate. Here, do you want to see Don Beebe almost get paralyzed?
1st and 10 from the 47. Reich hits open Beebe, and what a shot he takes.
He held on to it.
By Gary Jones at the 30-yard line.
Oh, that's as big a hit as a guy can take after catching the ball. That is a courageous performance by Beebe, knowing full well he's going to take a huge hit.
Wow, that really sucks for Don Beebe. Thank God. Do that on the street, you might get arrested. Do that nowadays, you get kicked out of football.
Yeah, Gary Jones was a Steelers safety who, people will. I was going to say nobody would remember. People do remember him because of stuff like that. He used to just crush people. He did that to a guy for the Cowboys too. He was just a fierce, one of the hardest hitters in the league. But he wasn't like, he was one of those like nickelback, dimeback safeties. You know what I mean? If he didn't have that from his moniker, no one would ever remember that he played for the Steelers. But
he's like a Chris.
Like that,
well, at least Chris Oldham seemed to make a lot of. He was like William Gay. They made a lot of interceptions at timely times.
Yeah, he's like what Chuck Clark is now on the Steelers.
Yeah.
He's like he'll fill in a gap if somebody's hurt, but he's really not going to play all that much. But that's what he did. He was feared. He was definitely feared. And that was back in the days when they didn't have all the protections in place.
Yeah, speaking of, so actually Barry Foster actually sprained an ankle. And do you remember Leroy Thompson from Penn State Sucks? Yeah. He had a great game. He had a solid year. And I think he went to I remember him going and playing for the Patriots. Jim Kelly actually got concussed on a sack. Gotta love the Three River Stadium parking lot. Turf. Carlton Hasselrig was active for this game, Tim. Speaking of blast from the past. The Bills this was the first time the Bills got shut out since 1985. So this is 1993, so it had been a while. And this was after the game in 1992, the playoff game where the Bills like Jim Kelly talked about it. Yeah, it was the 3rd and Sammy game. Sammy Walker, they just kept throwing on the Steelers' backup defensive back. So,
yeah, that was shocking. I think we might have talked about this before, Steve. But do you remember where you and I were for that game?
But were we at the Wilds for this? Yeah. Did we get to watch the game? No, we didn't. Yeah.
No, we didn't. We were at this like school retreat at this place in North Carolina, and we were not able to watch the game. And our principal,
no phones, no car, no motor car, not a single luxury, something like that. Yeah. There was no smartphones anyway, and they probably would have taken it off you if there were at the time. So.
Right. And this was in North Carolina, so nobody was like itching, except for like the people from our school were itching to like see the score of the game. So our principal actually went out Tuesday morning and came back and told us that the Steelers had won 20-0. And I thought for sure he must be mistaken. Like I'm like, there's no way, because again, like you said, we always lost to the Bills. And sure, there was a
I
chance we could
remember
have
the year
beaten them.
before we got blown out. Like Don Beebe caught a bunch of
Yeah,
passes. Like
that was that they beat us twice that year. They
Yeah.
beat us in 91. They in Buffalo, like you said, they were the 3-time defending, soon to be 4-time defending AFC champions. They had that great offense. That was the other thing. Like, it was plausible that we could beat them, but to shut down Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and James Lofton, like, they had these studs on offense. There's no way we shut them out. So I actually didn't believe them. I was like, I'm like, I'm sure you're not intentionally lying, but you probably just
misread
misread
it was the other way. It was
newspaper.
Bills 20,
Right,
Steelers here.
right, or it was like 20-17, and you just, yeah, I just couldn't believe that we actually had shut out that team. So, and I remember when I got home, my parents had taped it on a VHS tape. So the first thing I did when I got home was I like watched the entire game, and I was like, wow, this is so cool.
And it's funny, the Steelers weren't even that good in '93. That was the 9-7 year.
Yeah, they were very up and down that year. We did an episode on that team, and there were some weeks where they looked like the best team in the league, and they were beating the elite teams in the league. And there's other weeks where not so much.
So moving into a trio of games that are from probably one of the oddest seasons, I don't know, from one of the oddest years in the history of, I don't know, in history of my lifetime. I don't know about you, Tim, but I guess you could do a whole episode on 2020 if we wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
So 2020, the teams are playing in front of half-empty stadium, well, all the way empty stadiums with like piped-in noise. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then, like, even if you watch the game, like, the Steelers would still act like there was like a crowd, like they play all the music and stuff like they normally do, but there was nobody there. It was like, I guess the yellow seats were entertained, but it looked like a scrimmage game, or like the blue gold game, like Pitt plays in the spring. So it was definitely odd. They did that all season except for like games in Florida, because Florida like just decided to let people start attending games. So not to get into all of that. I mean, you could go off, I guess, on whether that was the right or wrong call.
Oh yeah, we're definitely not getting into that. We are guaranteed to lose half the listeners no matter what side we take on that. So we're not touching that with a 20-foot pole.
So what had happened was this game was supposed to be played on Thanksgiving, which was November 26th. And this is the game between the Steelers and Ravens. And this is actually not a Monday night football game. This is a Wednesday afternoon. So, Tim, are you ready for some Wednesday afternoon football? It's a Wednesday afternoon party. And it was on NBC, so I think Mike Tirico actually called the game, because originally it was supposed to be Thanksgiving, and then the Ravens, everybody got sick. And I guess they didn't want to play a game on Thanksgiving, make the Ravens play a game, so they postponed the game. And it's kind of funny because this is very hypocritical of the league, because that very same week they made Denver play a game with like a wide receiver at quarterback because all their quarterbacks got sick. So why didn't you just make the Ravens play with their backup quarterback? But no, they delayed it all the way. They were supposed to be played on Sunday, and then they were like, oh, we'll play it on Tuesday, and then they delayed it to Wednesday. And the Wednesday, they were going to play it Wednesday night, but NBC, who still owned the rights to this game, had the Rockefeller Christmas tree lighting ceremony, which I guess since it's COVID in New York, nobody's going to attend anyway. But the NBC felt the need to stick with that programming over an NFL football game. And that's what we did, Tim. That's how we ended up on Wednesday night. So no Lamar Jackson. I think they actually started what's his name? The third. No, they started the third guy.
Oh, RG3.
Yeah. And they had Trace McSorley ended up playing too, because RJ3 really wasn't that good. It wasn't without precedence. There's been 40 NFL games played on Wednesday. That was, of course, in the old Blue Law days in 1925. And the Steelers, who were previously known as the Pirates, had played 10 games on Wednesday. I think we'd gone over that in an earlier episode between 1933 and 1936. But neither the Ravens nor the Baltimore Colts ever played a game on Wednesday. So it was a first for the Ravens. The Steelers, I think, win 19-14. It's kind of a who cares game. Except for what it does to the Steelers is now the Steelers win and they have to play like their rival. And hey, let's make the Steelers play on Monday, December 7th. And, that I'll make a joke that will get us in trouble with him. That went about as well for the Steelers as it did for the United States Navy. So, the Steelers end up losing to Washington, whatever their name is at this point in time. The football team from Washington, previously known as the Redskins. And the Steelers had to play on 5 days rest, and they were an older team. So I think they needed a regular schedule. I really thought this screwed up their whole season, Tim, because this is when things went downhill in a hurry.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and so the Steelers do go up 14-0 on the Washington team. But at the end of the half, there's just play, and it just epitomized how the NFL was treating the Steelers at this point. I really think it was like they didn't want Ben Roethlisberger to have back in a Super Bowl ever again, and they just were going to go out of their way to screw over the Steelers, and this is perfect. So with 22 seconds left, Washington's driving to kick a last-second field goal before the half, and they have no timeouts. Stephon Tuitt, remember that guy? Sacks Alex Smith, and there's 22 seconds left, no timeout. So the clock's running, and instead of giving the ball, and when you watch I have the video, instead of he runs right by the official, Tim, with the football. He's looking, the official has his hands out. He runs onto the sideline. So I forget who the name, it was one of the terrible officials too. I haven't seen this guy in a while, so maybe he retired or got fired. But they actually stopped the clock with 10 seconds left so they can get the K ball because they needed the K ball to kick. And so they basically in all essence, they give Washington a fourth timeout for no reason. So the way it should have gone, and that was Dean Blandino, who never has met an NFL rear end he didn't want to kiss. Basically, well, normally in that situation, we just put the ball down. Well, Alex Smith had the ball, so that's delay a game. That's either A, delay a game. One of two things. It's either delay a game or you just run the clock, and the clock runs out, and everybody blames Alex Smith. But instead, Alex Smith is his big hero because he outsmarted and mistreated the big bad Steelers, who we all hate, because they're giving everybody CTE and they have a bad guy quarterback. It doesn't matter. For all my complaining and belly aching, it was still only 14-3. If the Steelers just play some defense and tackle and stop the ghost of Alex Smith, they should have won this game. The game ends up, what was the final score? 17-23. They didn't even have a field goal kicker. The Steelers, Boswell was out because I guess he got COVID. They had Matthew Wright. So at one point on a 4th and 1, Tomlin passed on that because you're kicking in Heinz Field with a kicker that was – Matthew Wright was accurate, but I don't think he had a very strong leg, if I remember correctly. It's just – the refs called it an administrative issue. It was the most ridiculous thing. But they couldn't tackle that one wide receiver for the Washington team. I can't remember. He wasn't even anybody good. They had McLaren, but he really didn't kill them the way the other guy did. Washington takes the lead on a field goal, and then with 2 minutes to go, it's 20-17. A Ben pass gets tipped by Keith Sweat and intercepted, and that's kind of the ball game. Washington, I think, kicked another field goal to make it 23-17, and that's kind of it. And that was the Steelers' first loss of the season. So
yeah, that whole season was crazy because of COVID. And to be fair, the scheduling thing was a mess, and it was very inconsistent. Like you said, they made Denver play that game with nobody, but they moved everything around for Baltimore. That didn't seem to make sense. The only thing I'll say, to be fair, it was a lot of nobody planned any of that. It was a lot of unprecedented. You saw that my kids were in elementary in middle school at that point, and I remember the school kind of doing the same kind of inconsistencies. Like, well, wait a minute, this but not that. And I think it was just a lot of just trying to like figure things out as we went because nobody had
Yeah.
ever seen anything like this in our lifetime. So I'll give them a little bit of grace for that, just because I think that it was really it was just hard to figure things out at that point.
I think it was a Thanksgiving game, and but I mean, what's the difference? I don't know. What if Lamar Jackson just legitimately gets hurt, like sprains his knee or something? Are you going to delay a game for that? Just because I don't know. Anyway, that leads us to Monday, December 21st, which is kind of the tail end of this. And this is the game that, like, I knew the Steelers were done. I kind of knew the Steelers were done before they were done because the Bengals were terrible that season. And the Steelers had to play Washington on 5 days rest. And then this game was 8 days later, but the damage was done. And they had to play 4 games in 19 days, which is a little much. Especially, like I said, it was inconsistent. It was an older team, and you're playing division rivals too, back to back. And not that Cincinnati didn't have they were starting some guy named Ryan Finley, who actually had not that great of a game. He went 7 for 13 for 89 yards and a touchdown, but that was enough to beat the Steelers because Ben just kept throwing interceptions. And there was even a pass, I remember, I was late in the first half or the second half where I forget. I want to say it was Chase Claypool was wide open in the end zone, and Ben just totally overthrew him. And I thought, that's fatigue. Ben makes that. I've seen that Ben make that throw 10 out of 10 times. This team's just tired and beat up, and just they just couldn't survive it for whatever reason. They just could not survive that. That was just the 3-game slide in that 2020 COVID year. Giovanni Bernard had 25 carries for 83 yards. The big news was Juju Smith-Schuster dancing on the logo before the game, which was just yeah.
That was a big controversy. The Juju dancing on the logo was a big controversy. Remember that?
Well, because he just kept doing stuff like that, and like you had your defenders, and he's just a kid, he's having fun. It's like you don't disrespect the team. Like if you want to do your stupid milk crate challenge, remember he did like a milk crate challenge, or he would show up and do like wild stuff. It was just. I think his act wore thin, but
yeah,
I don't know. It was kind of the same deal. Like even with Heinz Ward, how like he would always like, oh, nobody respected me. It kind of got like that. Like it wasn't necessarily like a bad thing, except for that. That was dumb, but it was just. And he wasn't Chase Claypool either. But boy, they had some real knuckleheads on the team there.
They did.
Yeah. But hey, he's got a Super Bowl ring, Juju. I mean, I don't know. He got that call in the Super Bowl to help the Chiefs win. So
that's right.
So just stupid. This whole like late season, they just totally fell apart. This is like probably one of the biggest collapses in Mike Tomlin's career. Wouldn't you say, Tim? And it all ends with a playoff loss to Cleveland, where they were just horrible at home. And Cleveland didn't even have its head coach. They were like, Stefanski was at home with COVID. So.
Yeah, I think Alex Van Pelt was calling plays. I think it was a pretty big collapse given that they started 11-0, right? Like they literally started 11-0. They
finished 12-4. Yeah,
yeah, they were gunning for the number 1 seed in the conference, and no Steeler team had ever even come close to something like that, 11-0. Yeah, there was even talk of could they go undefeated at one point. And so yes, it was a huge collapse. Like you said, I think it was brought on by a bunch of factors, the whole COVID mess, and being an older team, being fatigued, and really not being as good as that 11-0 record.
I don't. Your record is your record, Tim. I that drove me nuts that whole season, and I was thinking about this before I did this podcast, like. Why was I so like? Because like I never seen like anytime the Dolphins would go 5-0 or 6-0 or the Cowboys, it's like, oh, they're going undefeated, they're going to win the Super Bowl, and you're like, okay, no, they're not. But like people like every time the Steelers would win, and people like, oh, that was a terrible win. Oh, that was a terrible. They didn't have this, they didn't have that. So what? What do you want them to do? Like, wait, you play the teams you play and with the players they have, and.
Yeah, I don't think I felt like I wanted to take anything away from it. For me, it was more like they were definitely a good team. They were definitely going to be a playoff team, but they weren't they weren't like the elite cream of the crop in the
I guess
NFL.
I guess like you could say that you didn't have the same feel as that 15-1 team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so that's just more just eye test than anything. Yeah, you're right. You can't take their wins away, but you never felt like after I would say 5 or 6 games, you never felt like you did about that 15-1 team.
I will say this: Ben threw a lot of bad interceptions that year. Like I remember, like kind of like there was a game against Tennessee where we were going to put them away late in the game, and he threw like just an ill-advised pass. Like there was like literally three defenders, and like he tried to thread it between three people. It's like, dude, just take the L there, throw it out of the back of the end zone, and kick the field goal. Because that was a game the game we won on the Gostowski missed like a 53-yard field goal. So
Yeah, we did that episode about Ben getting hurt and how that really changed the course of Steeler history. He was never the same after that injury. He was effective, but he was never like the elite quarterback he always was again. And I think if they would have had all the right pieces, if they would have had like this, super stud defense like they had real early in his career, they maybe could have gone further. But um, again, it just and like everybody said, well, they're not as good as the 11-0 record, and then they kind of went out and proved everybody right.
who won the Super Bowl? That was the Chiefs' first Super Bowl.
No, that was Brady, Tampa
Oh,
Bay.
that was Brady. Yeah, that's right. It was. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they were a second place team. The Buccaneers, they were a
Yeah.
second place team. So again, it was a weird season. It wasn't the
And
typical.
that would Tampa played a home game for the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, but they played an away game against Rodgers at Green Bay for the NFC Championship
Yeah.
because they were a wild card team. So again, it wasn't. It just you knew it was going to be a weird season. You knew it was going to be a weird team that kind of I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but it was going to be one of those seasons where just some unexpected things happen just because of the conditions.
Yeah, what an odd season, Tim.
Yeah.
Moving back to 2010, a Monday game, the Steelers and Bengals. The Steelers have a very injured offensive line, which was kind of like the story of the 2010s, Tim. Chris Kimiwatu, Max Starks, and Marquise Pouncey were all either out or in and out of this game. Which was cool was the Steelers jumped out to a 20-point lead. So there's no way they can blow this. Yeah, they almost did blow it. They had to come all the way back. They actually, I think the game-winning touchdown was an Anton Randall to Mike Wallace touchdown pass, if I remember it. Well, Anton Randall did throw a pass to Mike Wallace for 39 yards. Terrell Owens, I forgot Terrell Owens played for the Bengals. He had actually a great game. He had 10 catches for 141 yards and a TD catch. Carson Palmer was good. 22 of 36, two TDs and an interception. 248 yards. Ben's not so great. 17 for 27, 163 yards, a TD and an interception. Rashard Mendenhall, if you don't if you just think of all the off-field stuff, you kind of forget that for this game. Boy, he was really good. He really, really effective. When I went back and watched the highlights, 22 carries for 99 yards doesn't do him justice. There were a lot of plays behind a makeshift offensive line where he broke out for like 5-yard carry when he could have easily been tackled for a 5-yard loss. So the play of the game was James Harrison hit Jordan Shipley to break up the pass on a 4th and 5, which actually Harrison hit him pretty legally. He didn't hit him in the head or anything. He was real carrying. He knocked the ball out. And that was 30 seconds to go, and the Steelers won. They get out of Cincy with a win. Any thoughts on the 2010 Steelers there, Tim?
Yeah, I mean that was another season where well, I think we did an episode on that season too, where like the 2020 season, it's a good team, but it had its flaws, and then when they got to the Super Bowl, I think a lot of those flaws were exposed, unfortunately. But man, some of all I could think about, Steve, is this lineage of Bengals quarterbacks. Jordan Shipley, Ryan Finley, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was back when Cincinnati was bad for a while, and but Juju wasn't there to dance on the logo, I guess, for that game.
To fire them up. We're gonna move back to 1993. This was a fun game to think that to kind of go back and look at. The 93 Dolphins Steelers. The Steelers win this one 21-20. And who do you think the Dolphins starting quarterback in 1993 was at this point?
Uh,
Let me give you a hint.
was
He was a backup. He was the quarterback before Joe Montana, I do believe.
yeah, it was Steve DeBerg.
He also backed up Chris Chandler in Atlanta. Steve Berg was around forever.
Yeah, he if I remember correctly, he retired and then came back he did like what Philip Rivers did. He came back like 5 years after he retired to start playing again.
And actually didn't play terribly.
Yeah.
So Steve DeBerg, he was the oldest quarterback in the league. Can you guess what the oldest quarterback in the league was? What age that was in 1993?
Oh gosh, it's going to be something silly like 34 or something.
You're close, 39.
Wow.
And he was actually playing over quarterback Scott Mitchell. And this was, of course, the year that I don't remember what week of the season was. I don't know if it was the first or second week, but I remember Dan Marino tore his Achilles early on in the season.
It was very early. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And talk about a player who was never quite the same after that. That was an injury that really messed Dan Marino up. Not that he was a running quarterback, but he could kind of like shuffle and move out of the way, and he really couldn't do that after that. OJ McDuffie with a punt return, and that's kind of the Steelers, like, what do we want to say, Achilles heel that year was special teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like they end up getting a blocked punt that kind of turns the tide in the Chiefs game in the playoffs, and Miller Hodge with a touchdown in this one. So, pretty amazing. Rod Woodson with an interception of Steve DeBerg in the final seconds that clinches the game for the win on a 21-20. So it was a pretty good. I think they never got close enough for a Pete Stoyanovich field goal. This was in Miami, so this was not away. So
there's two things I remember about that game. One, and I only remember this because we did a 93 episode and I dug it up. The intro to that game was not Hank Williams. That was the season that they were trying to do like all these like celebrity intros, and so the intro to that game was Salt and Peppa doing "What a Man," but they changed the lyrics to be like the Steelers and Dolphins.
What a fan! What a fan! What a
no,
man.
I think it was still "What a Man," but it was like the actual lyrics were like the Pittsburgh Steelers, blah 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 blah, Don Shula, like stuff like that. The other thing I remember is that when McDuffie returned that punt, it was in the fourth quarter, and the score at the time was 21-13. That was the year before they had
2 point. Yeah.
Yes. And so if OJ McDuffie scores that touchdown like 8 months later, then that would have potentially tied the game. But because back then an 8-point lead was safe, was a 2-score lead.
Now you have to have a 9-point lead.
Correct.
Or in the UFL, a 10-point lead, I guess.
Right, because they have the 3-point. Yep.
A 4-point kick or something stupid.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll skip around here a little bit on the notes. How about another game against Miami? We're going to finish up with a run of Miami games here because apparently we like to play Miami on Monday night a lot, and it's always interesting. The 96 season, Jimmy Johnson is head coach. You remember when Jimmy Johnson finished up his head coaching career in Miami?
Yeah.
The Steelers were 8-3. The Dolphins were 6-5. Dan Marino was quarterback. And do you remember who the running back for Miami was?
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah. And, after he was skyhooking in the NBA, no, it's a different person. He actually had a different name. He actually changed his name to that name, which is odd.
And I think he spelled it differently, if I remember correctly.
I don't know. He is not the second most points in the NBA, so he's not that guy. Just a mediocre running back for Miami. Um, Mike Tomczak hits Ernie Mills late in the fourth quarter, which is kind of impressive because hadn't Ernie Mills gotten hurt the year before in the Super Bowl?
Right.
Like, yeah, so good for Ernie. Bettis had 119 yards rushing, but who would have thought he fumbled? Uh-oh. Tomczak had a kind of Tomczak kind of night, 16 of 29, 250 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Cordell Stewart has a rushing touchdown in this one. The Steelers hang on to win because the Dolphins are driving once again, much like the Steve DeBerg game. But this time, Dan Marino and the immortal Scott Miller can't hook up in the end zone with 25 seconds to go. Dan Marino kind of throws like a higher pass, and it was catchable-ish, but if you're throwing to like, one of the better wide receivers, maybe. But I think, and the other game, remember Bernie Parmalee? He was in the 93 game. I totally forgot about Bernie Parmalee, but just to bring up rare, Dolphins of the 90s for 100, Alex.
Did the Steelers get on the team plane to fly home and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in the cockpit?
Wait a minute. I know you. You're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I'm sorry, son, but you must have me confused with someone else. My name is Roger Murdoch. I'm the co-pilot.
You are Kareem. I've seen you play. My dad's got season tickets.
I think you should go back to your seat now, Joey.
Yeah. You try and carry Dan Marino up and down the field for 100 yards. Anyway, a game I attended, Tim. How about this one? Monday, November 26, 2007. The Steelers 3, Miami nothing. What an exciting game, Tim. I was at this game. This is, I guess you can call it the turf game. Actually, the highlight of this game is where the punt stuck in the mud, like a golf shot. I don't know if you got to take a drop, if the Dolphins could take a drop on that, or what do you think the ruling on that was? There was just a terrible rainstorm before this, and they had Pitt had played, and the high school championships had played before, so they tried to replace the turf. And if it wouldn't have rained, it probably would have been okay. But because it did rain, it just messed everything up. The Dolphins had a ton of injuries. They started quarterback John Beck. Sure. Ben was 18 of 21 for 165 yards and interception. Willie Parker actually had 24 carries for 81 yards, which I think is impressive on the turf the way it was. So Hines Ward, 9 catches for 88 yards because he's Hines Ward. And they had like a last-second drive. I just remember that to kick the field goal and make it 3-0. It was a pretty not great game to watch, but
it was embarrassing too. I mean, it was Heinz Field had turf problems since the day it opened in 2001, and
that's probably the height of them.
Yeah, they've mostly got it fixed after.
It's not great, but it's not that bad anymore.
No, it's never been as bad as it. That you're right. That was the apex of how bad it got, and then because it was a Monday night game, the whole country kind of got to see what a joke it was. And then the Roonies were finally like, okay, we got to do something to fix this.
So where does that leave us? 3-0. Do we want to go with the game that ended Tua Tagovailoa's career? How about that, Tim? And I guess this is technically still a continuation of the streak if you include the regular season, right?
Right.
So, the Steelers win 28-15. Tua goes, see, this is what's so deceptive. Like this is why people think he's good. He goes 22 of 28 for 253 yards, 2 TDs, and 1 interception. And you're like, well, that's as good as anybody else on this list. But the fact it was all after the game was well in hand.
Right. It was garbage time yards. Yeah. That was in 2025. That was the Steelers had that game won by like the end of the third quarter.
Yeah, easily in hand. Rodgers, I mean, about the same, 224 yards, 2 TDs, and no interceptions. Like, if you're playing fantasy football, you're like, whoa, Tua is good. Or if you're betting on the game, whatever. It's very deceptive, like that, how stats can be deceptive. But that's the current, if you still consider it a streak, that would be the current game the Steelers are on as of 2026 after the season. So what the game, I'm going to consider the streak somewhat over. I mean, Monday, January 13th, the Texans, who had not won a playoff game on the road ever in the history of the franchise, which isn't that old, the Steelers should have won this game. The Texans win 30-6, but the score isn't indicative of how the game went. I really think if the Steelers take advantage of CJ Stroud and get like a 10 or 14 point lead in that game, I don't think the Texans win it, because then the Steelers don't have to throw the ball at all, and the Texans can't just win it on defense. And I just they totally had CJ Stroud rattled. Well, and then they tried when they got down, when they finally scored some points, the Texans, and the Steelers had to start passing with Rodgers. That's when their defense was able to take advantage, and Rodgers turned the ball over twice, and that was kind of the ball game. So.
Yeah, it's amazing, Steve. That's one of those games. There's so many things in sports where somebody's going to look at that in 15 years and say, "Wow, 30-6, what a blowout!" It was 7-6 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, if the Steelers,
quarter,
when CJ Stroud was fumbling and throwing interceptions, if they just scored 10 points off of that.
If they just had a lead, any kind of lead, it would have been you're right, it would have been a completely different game. But it was 7-6 in the fourth quarter, and then it just kind of got out of hand, like you said. But it was literally like a 1-point game all the way close to the end of the game, and then it just fell apart. And you're right, they did not. You can't have a team turn the ball over that many times in a playoff game and not capitalize on it, and then expect to win.
Yeah, if they get the 17 or 20 points, I don't think the Texans have enough on offense. And then you don't have to take chances on your offense. You can just run the ball into the line, and as long as you don't fumble, pick up a first down here and there when you need to.
Yeah, well, they scored 30 points. 14 of them were on defensive touchdowns, right? So you're right. It was very it was an odd game, and it was Mike Tomlin's last ever game.
Yeah. So with the loss, I guess the Texans have finally won a road playoff game, and I guess the streak is over-ish, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it depends how you count it. People still say, the Browns haven't won at Heinz Field for X amount of years, but because they're not counting the playoff game that they won in 2020. Right, so it's that.
I think that counts more than.
I agree, but it technically, again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, when you're talking about records, if you're talking about stats and records, you don't count the postseason. So it's all semantics.
So the overall record of the El Steelerinos, 32-5 home record. They've won 23 straight. It really was like an amazing streak too, because it carried through two coaches, Tim, Cowher and Tomlin, which is kind of an odd thing. Like it wasn't just like 2 years with Tomlin. It was as long with Tomlin as it was with Cowher for whatever reason. The Steelers have had 90 games total on Monday Night Football. The Cowboys have the most at 93. And like I said, the Steelers have become like a regular staple on Monday Night Football. In contrast that with, like, I showed these Bengals games, like, we went over those Bengal games. Do you realize, like, those are like half the times the Bengals have been on Monday Night Football is because they are playing the Steelers? Isn't that crazy, Tim? I mean, it's just like, and I picked the Bengals because I didn't want to pick like Jacksonville or Houston, or I even left Tampa out since they're kind of an expansion team. But like really, like, I didn't want to skew the record, but like the Bengals have they've only been on Monday Night Football 43 or 44 appearances. So they have the fewest among teams that have been in the league since 1970. So that doesn't count like Tampa and Seattle are still in like the 30s, but they've only been playing since 1976. So I don't know.
Going back to what you said about Cowher and Tomlin, I never thought about that, but you're right. The streak literally started in Cowher's first season and ended in Tomlin's last season.
Yeah, it's a weird symmetry, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll continue under the next coach.
Maybe.
So what happened to Monday Night Football, Tim? What happened was the NFL started playing games multiple days of the week. You got Thursday, you got Sunday night, you got Tuesday night, you got Wednesday afternoon football, Tim. It's all there because we can't interrupt the tree lighting. So with that, ESPN moved to more gimmicking tactics, I guess, as the ratings started to wane. Do you remember Dennis Miller, who I liked on Monday Night Football? I liked, and then they had like Tony Kornheiser, who I thought wasn't bad. And but did you happen to catch the Manning cast? I do like the Manning cast of Monday Night Football. I do enjoy them.
I haven't actually watched it live, but I've caught like snippets of it.
Like when Eli flipped the double bird.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
He's like, they'll edit this, right? It's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Eli's the best, by the way.
I love
if
Eli.
You don't love that guy, then you're just not a happy person.
Eli's fun. He cracks me up. He seems like he'd be like Peyton would be fun to hang out with. Eli would be fun to hang out with too. I don't think you'd be bored. That's for sure.
I don't think you'd be bored. And that's why it was smart doing that with the two of them, because they just kind of play off of each other, and it's an interesting thing to do, especially if you don't really, if it's not your team playing the game.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just watching it for the fantasy stats or something, and it gives you something kind of more interesting to watch.
Well, speaking of more interesting to watch, have you ever watched a game in Monster Vision, Tim?
No.
Oh, well, you're missing out. Well, I have a link to that, and all our podcast fans can definitely watch the game between the Rams and the Eagles in Monster Vision with Sully and Mike Wachowski and all the people from Monsters Inc. Because it isn't like Disney and ABC are trying to hype their own property. I think the NHL does this too. Like they had games like, I don't know, is that, or I guess that's an ESPN thing too. Like they have cartoon games. Like it's weird. Like they actually take the game and make them into like cartoon characters and they play football ish. It's just really odd, Tim.
Yeah. I don't get it, but
I'm not a little kid either.
Right.
I mean, they have, at least Slime Time is just like a replay of the game and like mainly the highlights, and it's for kids. So,
yeah.
Also, Monday Night Football moved to ESPN from 2006 to 2019. So, Monday Night Football, like as it's proper, probably really ended in 2006, I would guess. Now the announcers are Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, who actually aren't bad. They're solid announcers. It's just, and like they stopped. I remember they stopped. I don't think they still do because they don't flex games for Monday. They stopped having televising games the last week of the season because like they'll end up with like, hey, let's pick the Steelers and Packers, thinking that's a good game, and then either A, both teams are eliminated from the playoffs, or B, both teams have clinched a playoff berth, which means that it's inconsequential game. So that was the reason, like Monday Night Football, and that was another problem. Was like Monday Night Football, you always set the schedule like the year before, and the problem with that is you can't account for injuries or which team's going to have a good season or which team's going to have a bad season. So you always try and like pick good matchups, like what like a good matchup might be Steelers Cowboys or Steelers Packers, which you would think, oh, that's going to be a great game, but it could be both teams are having an off season, or Lamar Jackson got injured or has COVID or whatever. So
that's what really started the downfall, Steve. That the parity that happened in the 90s, really the late 90s, after everybody had a few years to adjust to the salary cap, because everything was predictable before that. In the 80s, it's like you put the 49ers on there or the Giants or the Redskins. Like these were the powerhouse teams. You knew they were going to be the powerhouse teams. But then you got into like the late 90s. And remember that one year the Falcons made the Super Bowl when they stunk the year before. The year after that, the Rams made the Super Bowl when they had stunk the year before. The year after that, the Ravens made the Super Bowl when they had stunk the year before. Like that, it was just, and then the Patriots when they were 5-11 the year before. Literally like 4 years in a row, 5 years in a row of teams making the Super Bowl that kind of came out of nowhere. And then the opposite effect happened too, where the teams they thought were going to be good, like you said, they put on these marquee games, and then you get to week 12 and it's these two terrible teams and nobody cares anymore. And so when the NFL figured out, hey, we can make Sunday the game of the week, and then we can flex it and be
it's easier to flex a 1:00 game to 8:00
yes.
than it is move a whole day. Although they're starting to do that now too. I mean,
well, they are, but it's bad game proof,
right?
And I think the viewing habits changed too. You also started to get like the direct TV Sunday ticket kind of stuff. You had
I think that's what killed Sunday ticket too. Was like I remember when I had Sunday ticket, I was like, there's like 4 games on at 1:00 today. Like, why am I paying all this money for Sunday ticket when all the games are so spread out? Even Red Zone is getting like that now too. Like I'm finding because there's so many games throughout the week, it's like ruining NFL Red Zone.
Yeah, but my point just being like before, if you think back to like the 70s when this started, and you had 3 networks, like you said, you had the game in your market,
yeah,
and then like so like you had like the Steelers, and then you had like the Cowboys over on CBS, and then you had the Monday night game, and the Monday night game was the only game that you could really watch. You got to see all these other teams. I remember being a kid, I never got to really watch Joe Montana. You didn't have all those games on TV, but then you saw them on Monday night.
And there was no YouTube or internet where you go, let me watch the highlights.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So that's what made it big. That and the fact that it was a showbiz production. Like you said, they had the 3 announcers. Nobody had 3 announcers. Nobody had celebrities in the booth.
Right.
Nobody had like flashy songs, intro songs. That was all new and glitzy. And so that's why it became such a big thing. And after a while, that just kind of assimilated into the culture and it wasn't special anymore. So by the time you got into the 2000s and 2010s and had Sunday Night Football being a big deal, Monday Night Football wasn't what it used to be.
Still isn't, which is a shame. But I think sometimes you have to realize with a product like, and I think maybe I'll compare this to baseball cards. Less is more. Sometimes less is more. Like if I would get rid of the Thursday night game, quite honestly, and just you need to keep stuff on either Saturdays late in the season after college football's over. Wait till college football's over and do Saturday games, and then just do Sunday games and Monday night games and the Thanksgiving game and Christmas game whenever that falls. That's I think if you did that, I realized, you could still stream games. I mean, if you want to, I guess that's what they're trying to do is they're trying to squeeze out games on these streaming services. But like I've missed so many. Like I remember the first time like Netflix had the streaming game and I missed it. I was like, oh man. And then this year they had a couple I didn't even care. Like, so you're losing fans by doing this. And I don't think they realize that. Because they're like, oh, it's the biggest streaming event ever. Yeah, it's like 3 million people. Do you realize like how many a normal broadcast of NFL football gets?
It doesn't
It's
matter.
like quadruple that, Tim.
But so you're right.
It doesn't matter because there's playing billions of dollars. But
that's right.
The bubble's gonna burst here. It's like anything else in life. Eventually, the bottom's gonna fall out of this market, and just wonder who's what's going to happen from there, and will these players be able to adjust when the salaries go down because I don't see that happening anytime soon. But you're right, everything people didn't see Rome falling either, so it's stuff does happen. It's the law. It's just human nature. It's the way the world works.
It is.
You can't fight it forever.
You can't, but I mean, my goodness, just the gambling and the fantasy football alone have skyrocketed the NFL into territory that no other sports league could even dream of approaching.
Right, and they pander to those guys.
Well, and it's a perfect sport for those things.
Right, it's once a week. It's a short. It's not a super long season.
Right.
Yeah.
If I have to set my fantasy hockey team every night, I'm going to lose interest. But football, it's once a week. Gambling, man, you can gamble on like what the next play is going to be.
Yeah.
Literally, that's something that that you just don't have in other sports. So it really appeals to those audiences, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're going to add an 18th game. They're going to just rake in more and more money. So I don't see it ending anytime soon. And like I've said before, Steve, you know, I we sit here and complain, but then we're right there on Sundays turning on
Well,
whatever
I will
the
say that
game has on.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hate to admit this. Like, I don't watch the Thursday night games unless it's the Steelers. I don't. It's
Yeah.
normally a terrible game. And if it's on Netflix, I don't care. I'm not signing up for Netflix just for one game. I don't watch anything else on that streaming service. So.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, that's it for this episode. We love talking about Monday Night Football. Apparently, everybody else does too. Especially if you're older and you want to reminisce about the downfall or your memories, or Bernie Parmalee faking an injury to give the Dolphins more time at the end of the game, or Alex Smith stealing a ball on a Monday night game that was on Fox. Tim, that Monday night game for Washington was on Fox. Check us out on Facebook. The Facebook page is great. Tim does a great job there. You can check us out on our website if you want to catch up on past episodes. But more easier is on Spotify and all the other streaming services. Give us a good ratings there. It helps us reach more people. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your wives, girlfriends, people you see out on the street at the grocery store or whatever. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time, and God bless.